This program is brought to you by Emory University.
All right, good morning. Thank you for braving Atlanta traffic. Luckily, it's a week from the snow, so there's no weather this week. But welcome to Emory Law. My name is Nicole Morris, and I am the director of the Tiger program and a professor of practice here at the law school and organizing this wonderful event on blockchain today. So thank you for coming out. I'm just going to provide a couple of sort of welcome remarks for you, give you a little bit of an orientation to what we're going to cover today, and then quickly turn it over to our opening speaker so we can get the conference underway. Obviously, blockchain is an exciting topic. It's gotten a lot of press recently. It can cover innovation in many different ways. And today's conference is really to highlight something other than the cryptocurrency use for blockchain. We will talk about crypto, but that's not our focus. So I know we've got some subject matter experts in the room. We've got people who are like, I've only heard of blockchain. Don't worry, we're going to try to cover that entire landscape in terms of, it's going to be a mile wide, but about an inch deep. If you want to get more or talk more with our speakers at the networking break, there will be an opportunity to talk. There'll be some folks coming in to showcase what they're doing with blockchain, or just showcase what they're doing in the entrepreneurial space generally here in Atlanta. So that will be an opportunity for people to get a deeper dive. But I can't have you come to Emory Law and not give a quick commercial for the Tiger program. So we've got some students in the audience. This is basically my day job, you know, why they have me on staff. But it's a unique program in the sense that it's law, business, and technology. So the Innovation Conference that we do every year is really a way to showcase some really creative technology or innovation opportunity, not only for our students, but for the community at large. So we've got Georgia Tech MBAs, a few of them are here. We have Emory Law students, and then a PhD candidate either from Georgia Tech or Emory, and they work in teams to commercialize technology. So if you want to learn more, follow us on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, please share what you want about the conference. I'm going to tweet out a few things here in a minute and get this show going on the social media space. But with that, you've got the bios of all of our panelists, hopefully, in your packet. We're going to start off our conference with a what is blockchain? How does it work? I've never heard of this, or I've heard of it, but I don't understand it. I've heard it explained to me, and I still don't understand it. We're going to start off with our speaker, Rich Napoli, who is here from Maryland, and he's CEO of Object Frontier. He's also going to be on the panel after this. So, Rich, why don't you get up here?
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks. All right, Scott, you got me? All right, way to go, Scott. You promised I could do this. I'm Italian. I like to walk around and use my hands, so I need a wireless mic. So Nicole asked me to come and sort of do the blockchain for dummies kind of introduction, which is great because I'm eminently qualified as a dummy, especially compared to the panelists you're going to have up here. It's really, we had dinner last night and just some incredible subject matter experts here. But you know, I just want to sort of level set us all as to what blockchain is. Some of you know a lot about it. Some of you might just know a little bit. And just talk a little bit about the hype, which is all over the place right now, and of course the hope. It is a significant technology, quite new, but quite significant. So you know it's gone mainstream when it's in Dilbert, right? So and if you can't read from here, it says, you know, Dilbert's boss says, I think we should build a blockchain. And Dilbert's like, uh-oh. And then Dilbert says, does he understand what he said, or is it something he saw in a trade magazine? And he responds, what color do you want your blockchain? And of course, the boss, not knowing anything, says, I think mauve, because that has the most RAM, right? So it's sort of that notion right now where we are. People know blockchain, they've heard of it, they may know a lot, but a lot of them don't know a little. The second one was something that my marketing specialist found out that, you know, we've been posting on the hashtag blockchain kind of things. Well, now there's a hashtag Beyonce chain. I don't get it, but they basically take all my tweets that are on blockchain and retweet them on the Beyonce chain. And their tagline is, if you liked it, you should have put an ASIC on it, which is Very obscure application-specific integrated circuit. I'm not sure how funny that is, but the point is, everybody's talking about blockchain, right? It's crossed over into the mainstream media. So let's talk about some of the hype. You know, you hear people saying, it's as big as the internet. And to be fair, I mean, it is a big concept. It has a lot of potential, and we're going to talk about some of that. It is not as big as the internet. You know, the internet can exist without blockchain. The blockchain can't exist without the internet. So it is a big concept, though. You hear the hysteria. It will eliminate all clerical jobs. And there's some, you know, there will be some adjustment. There will be some people will lose jobs over time because of blockchain. But it will create a whole new industry as well. This one might be something tough for this crowd, but you hear this, especially when we hear about smart contracts, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but that it will eliminate the need for all lawyers. I actually have the opposite thing, that because this is so complicated and so technically rich, that it will actually increase the need for lawyers as you try to unravel it all. It'll eliminate the need for cash. No one's going to carry cash anymore, especially thinking of Bitcoin. I kind of feeling that there's always going to be a need for cash. Somebody's always going to want to be doing things more discreetly than with even Bitcoin. It's cryptologically secure and can never be hacked. I've been in the software business for 40 years. It's software. Software can be hacked, just plain and simple. It may be a lot harder to hack this, but it can be, you know, it will. And the other fear is that it will be hacked, maybe by China or somebody else, that, you know, it's going to be corrupt and we're going to lose all our money and so on. So there's a lot of hype around this. But let's talk a little bit about some of the hope. That it will create a system of digital trust. Now I'm telling you about sort of the impact, the hype and the hope before I even told you what it is. But I want to just give you a sense of, you know, why we're talking about this technology. To create a system of digital trust between unrelated parties so that you can now do business or transact with somebody you've never met, because there's, instead of a third-party intermediary, in some ways the blockchain is the intermediary for you, especially for contracts and so on. We're going to come back to some of that. It'll reduce a lot of the redundant systems. This is where I see a lot. We'll talk at the end. I came out of the Wall Street business, and the amount of reconciliation that has to happen between parties just to do a single trade of stock. I sell Nicole 100 shares of IBM. There's 9 counterparties to all have to be reconciled in order to make that transaction a legal transaction. With blockchain, that has the potential to go down to a much simpler system and reduce a lot of the redundant systems. It could provide, and it will provide, for entirely new business models. And this is just, you know, I'm a car guy, so everything's cars. So, you know, you could have the ability to lease car parts, and because you'll be able to track their usage over time, you could lease spare equipment, and again, monitor the maintenance records and service records of all those things, and maybe sell them again. All right, so what is blockchain? First of all, blockchain is not a thing. You can't touch blockchain. It's not even software itself. Blockchain is a theoretical concept. It's a software architecture concept. But it has to be implemented. It has to be written as code somewhere, like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an example of blockchain technology, and we're going to talk about a lot of other examples besides that as well. It's first theorized in the 90s, came out, actually, I think that's wrong, came out in 2009 in Bitcoin. And very simply, and everybody uses this example, but you know, it's a store of records. It's a place to store data. It's a ledger. Think about, you know, I'm not a good accountant, but you know, back to my accounting days, or even just your checkbook, right? Your checkbook has a balance, and that balance represents the sum of all the transactions that went before it. Every deposit you made, every check you wrote, all kind of sits in there, and finally you get to the total at the bottom. Well, that's similar to the blockchain. You have records of information called blocks, and they get chained together, and the last one contains the most current information of that ledger. But there's a couple of characteristics that are unique to this. In blockchain, you only write once to the chain. You can append to the chain, but you can't change easily anyway. You can't change what's in the chain. So it's somewhat, the term you hear a lot used is it's immutable. Can't be changed. It's cryptographically secure, and we're going to go into a little bit. I'm actually going to wander into the notion of hashing, because everybody like flicks off when they hear that word, but I'm going to try to explain a little bit. But it's cryptographically secure. It is hard to hack. It's distributed, that's another thing, and there's not one store of data that is the master central location that everybody points to. This is based on what's called consensus algorithms. So the information is replicated across many, many, many servers. And there's a consensus mechanism to sort of derive the truth, the agreed upon truth. It's not controlled by any single party, which is good, especially when you're trying to do things anonymously, and no one can sort of overrule what you did. And the records survive relatively indefinitely, like as long as the internet and the servers are around. So let's just step back a little bit. A simple example of where you might look at a blockchain helping out. And I'm going to go back to the checkbook example. You're supposed to balance your checkbook. I think it's a good idea, but I haven't done it since 1988, so I'm a bad example here. But you record your transactions, your checks, your deposits, your withdrawals, and your bank records transactions that it knows about, right? So your payroll deposits, your transfers, your checks, ATM fees, and so on. And then you have to go and sort of reconcile that yourself. You have to decide, match them up and report any differences and resolve those discrepancies. But what if there was just one place that both of you wrote to? There was only one store of information, a common ledger that both you and the bank wrote to, and it became the one source of truth. There wouldn't be multiple truths here. It wouldn't be a reconciliation required because you would both have access to that single ledger. So that's just a simple sort of human example. Another human example, anytime you go to a new doctor, what's the first thing you do? They tell you to get there a half hour early. Why? Because you're going to fill out like a gazillion forms to tell the doctor all the tests you've had, all the medications you've took, all the procedures you've had done for your whole life. And as you get older like me, that gets harder and harder to remember. So, and then that doctor will prescribe new things based on what you told him or her. That's me. You're going to forget. You're going to forget some of that. And maybe the doctor will prescribe the wrong things. But now, again, suppose there was a single ledger of that, a single store of that over the course of your lifetime, with your permission, doctors sort of appended to your personal record of your health. So all the tests and procedures and medications that you have had done are now sort of stored in a cryptographically secure place that no one can touch unless you give them permission. So you don't have to remember everything. It would all be in the blockchain. So that's it. I'm just trying to give you, again, set the stage a little bit about what possible uses for blockchain. As you'll see, there's many, many more, but trying to warm you up to this. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin because everybody sort of knows Bitcoin. How many people actually own Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency? Wow, okay, good. Mikhail was predicting that, yeah. quite a good turnout. Tom and the other guy. All right, so Bitcoin is a type of currency built on top of blockchain. So let's make a quick distinction. So again, I'm a car guy. Blockchain is an engine. An engine could be in a car, a boat, a plane. Bitcoin is a particular car. It's like saying it's a Ford Mustang, and using the engine of blockchain. So blockchain has 1 million uses. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is but one. It's gotten the most press so far, but it's just one. Bitcoins only exist digitally. You might see those nice little pictures of Bitcoins, the logo on them. It's just a drawing. It is completely digital. There's no paper, no coin. You can transfer them pretty easily. No bank is involved, no government is involved. And we'll talk about that's why that's good and bad. There's the picture of Bitcoin. It's accepted by many vendors now. I'll give you a list in a little bit. And there are exchange networks that help you move that money around. What do I got here? All right, I'm sorry. I went too far ahead. I don't know why this is not showing anything. That's weird. Well, I'm not sure what happened to that slide, but imagine a slide that shows a network of users that are trying to exchange funds. So, boy, I'm really, without that, I'm lost. The idea being that you want to transfer money, you go to a network, and you can select who you want to transfer money to, and then the network goes about and figures out whether you have the money to be given, and then goes out and using there's a lot of different, what they call consensus algorithms, ways to validate that that transaction is real and that that transaction occurred. Bitcoin uses something called proof of work. There's proof of work, proof of stake, proof of elapsed time. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Bitcoin uses something called hashing, which is a way to make a secure notification of a transaction. And I'm going to spend a minute on there's actually probably 2 slides I'm missing here. I'm not sure what happened. They were there a second ago. But I want to give a little side note to hashing, just so people, don't get so confused by it. So imagine I'm going to take my name, Rich Napoli, and I'm going to use a table here, a very simple idea. So the letters A through Z on the top, and the numbers 1 through 26 on the bottom. And I'm going to assign a number to each letter. Because the whole idea about hashing is that you're going to take that entire name, my full name, and distill it down to a single number. And that's going to be a unique identifier for that transaction. So imagine here, this is my name. So you can see R is 18. I had all kinds of great graphics for this, but they went away. I is 9, C is 3, and then you add them all up and you come up with a number of 38. Oh, there you go, there's my second name, Napoli, which also can be calculated to a single number. And then when you add those together, you come up with a new number. And take a look at that. It's sort of like this is where the notion of blockchains come together, is that think of these as individual blocks. This is a hash number. And they are chained together to create a new number. So that's what we're software guys. Blockchain is not a particularly creative marketing term, but the concept is they are blocks that are chained together. Just like your checkbook, the next number is a function of all the other deposits and withdrawals you do. This next number is a function of all the other blocks that came before it. And so why is that important? Well, it's important because everybody can calculate that, so they can quickly verify that that is the right number. If somebody goes back, it's not that blockchains can't be edited. They can, but then what happens? Let's go back and say, change my name here. I'm going to change it to Mitch. All right? Well, guess what happened now? So the very first entry is changed. Now it's now 53. And more importantly, the last number has changed. So people can instantly tell. Even if I went and said, this is now the new record, people say, no, that's not right. We all agreed that it's whatever I had there, 105, not 120, and they would kind of reject that transaction. Now, look, real hashing is infinitely more complex than this. I just wanted to give you sort of a little window into it. In the Bitcoin world, to calculate the hash for the next block of records takes about 10 minutes. I have that ringtone because I'm up on the altar a lot, and this way nobody thinks I'm doing anything funny. What's my thought now? So you want to be able to preserve that. You want to be able to notify people that are changing it, and be aware that that something sort of illegal has happened. I was going to say the Bitcoin world. It takes 10 minutes of high-powered computing. Mikhail's going to talk a little bit about some of that. This is not something you do on your PC anymore. To calculate that next hash takes 10 minutes they actually have entire server farms just to crank through that. And as they do that, they actually earn some money for doing that. Well, maybe we jump on to see how this can work. So Alice has some Bitcoins in her private account, which can be purchased on exchange. She wants to transfer some Bitcoins to Bob. First, that request is verified to make sure that Alice actually has the 10 Bitcoins. And if that request is good, then it's available to be grouped with other transactions into a block. And this is where the mining, you hear this term mining a lot. Now the miners are the guys that do that complicated hashing. They're the ones that add the transaction between Alice and Bob, add it to a block, and solve this incredibly difficult mathematical cryptographic algorithm to come up with what they think is the next hash number. And they're very big, giant numbers, 12 leading zeros and all kinds of things. The first guy that does that gets the right, kind of proposes it out to the network. And it's very weird is that it takes 10 minutes to calculate, it only takes a second to validate. So it's one of those ones that once you've come up with the answer, everybody instantly knows that that's the right answer. Now you've earned the right to sort of propose to have that block added out and extended on to the ledger of records. And you earn some Bitcoin as a reward. So there are people that do this, but it's not, in the early days you could do it on your own PC. You will never work fast enough to actually be the winner of this competition and get your block proposed out there in time. But the block is recorded, and now the transaction between Alice and Bob is complete, and everyone agrees that it happened. It's much like as if I gave Nicole $10 in front of all of you, there would be a consensus among all of you, or most of you, that you saw me do it. Here's a $10 bill, I just gave it to Nicole. That's sort of what's principle here, is that because everybody validates that transaction, says, yep, that's the right number, we have reached consensus that that is the next block. And anyone else that has something different, and some of you might not have seen me give the $10 to Nicole, but enough of you have seen me to know that it's real. And again, you're only appending to the end of it. We're not going back and changing it, we're only adding to the end of it. All right, so let's move on. Some of the popular businesses that accept Bitcoin, and it's a growing list. Microsoft lets you buy some content on Xbox now with Bitcoin. Subway lets you eat fresh with Bitcoin. I'm not sure why you would ever use it that way, because it's, you have to sit there and wait while they calculate it for you. But Reddit, Virgin Galactic, Expedia, Overstock.com, one of our customers, Gift, Newegg, and the list keeps growing of companies that accept it. So why do you use Bitcoin, blockchain and Bitcoin? Because this came out of sort of the underworld initially, right? It was used for a lot of transfer of funds for criminals that wanted to hide their identity. And there's no central clearing authority, no countries involved. It's trusted because there's this consensus that's built through whatever, through a calculation or through some other means. Everyone agrees on what has transpired. It's relatively immutable. Once it's done, and no one knows who you are. And it's valuable when multiple parties need access to the same data. The data needs to be updated periodically. You need to be sure that's not tampered with. And for a variety of reasons, you want no central authority. And that's where blockchain is important. It is not the answer for everything. Right now, people are going hysterical and pitching blockchain as a solution for everything. Every IT challenge, every technical challenge, every world problem is now going to be solved by blockchain. And that's where you kind of have to tamp that down a little bit and say, look, it's a great technology, but it's got problems, like all technologies. One other concept I want to introduce before I get the panel up here is the notion of a smart contract, because this is another key use of blockchain. And I want to introduce what is a smart contract? I'll give you an analogy here that helped me understand it. The notion of a vending machine. Think about that. It is a contract between you and the vending machine manufacturer that says, I'm going to put money in, and I'm going to press a button, and if I've put enough money for that product, you're going to turn the wheel, and the product is going to dispense. Right? It's sort of a contract that's implemented in hardware. It's implemented in technology, in this case, the vending machine. So a smart contract in the blockchain world is the same idea. It's a contract that's written inside the blockchain itself. So the rules and the terms of the contract are actually inside the blockchain. So what does that mean? Well, it means as you are, once the rules are in there, as transactions are happening, you are sort of executing those rules inside the chain. So for example, if I was a trucker and I'm delivering 100 refrigerators on a truck, as someone is there scanning each box and recording the fact that refrigerator was received, when it gets to the 100th one, the blockchain says, I know when I receive 100, I have to wire this guy money. And so the actual terms of the contract, the price and everything will be inside the blockchain, and that blockchain will automatically execute and send the money immediately. So here's where you start to see maybe where there's not as much need for clerical staff, because there's no invoice, there's no accounts receivable, there's no accounts payable. It's an instantaneous transfer once the terms of the condition or the contract are met. And hypothetically, as I said, this is where you'd also see potentially the reduction in the need for attorneys because there would be less potential for dispute. Although I have a lot of issues with that. I think there's actually going to be some more potential for disputes because this is just the basic path. What happens when only 99 were received? What happens when 100 were received but it was the wrong model number? What happens when one is damaged? So you have to have some fairly complex rules written into the blockchain. And guess what? That becomes, what else would you call all those rules? A program. It's code. It's software. And software has bugs. And I've written a lot of buggy software in my day. So it's going to be ripe for dispute throughout its life. There's a couple of popular platforms out there that are doing smart contracts. You may have heard of Ethereum and Hyperledger. Those are two of the main ones. I'm not going to talk too much. There's different kinds of blockchains. There's public blockchains, there's private blockchains, there's permission blockchains, but Ethereum is a public blockchain backed by the Ethereum Foundation, founded by one of the founders of Linux, so quite well understood. There is a programming language there that you can use to create those smart contracts, and the terms are entered as part of the blockchain transaction. Hyperledger is a private blockchain, again, open source kind of, but invested heavily by IBM and Intel and others, that for permission blockchains is going to be more, I think, what you're going to see, frankly. Permission blockchain says, unlike Bitcoin, where anybody, all of us can participate in Bitcoin and participate anonymously, permission blockchains require permission, that somebody has to give you sort of authority and access to the blockchain for conducting a particular type of contract, a particular type of service. And it also has the language, the Go language. All right, let's wrap up here. The ways that blockchain can be used, and the list is endless, folks. I'm just going to give you a few examples here. Real estate. So how many of you have ever bought property and had to hire a title insurance agent to come kind of check to see whether your property is titled properly, whether that person that's selling you the house actually has the right to sell the house? Do they actually own the house? Well, again, blockchain could be that nice. Right now, titles are kept in drawers in some local government office. If they're put up on the blockchain, you could have that sort of provenance of the property for the life of the property. Everybody that owned it, everybody that sold it, any mortgages that were against it, any liens that were against it, you would instantly be able to see that. Any kind of logistics tracking, chain of custody type stuff, cars, jewelry, artwork. I like to think of it as a FedEx number, that just tracks that item for the life of the number. Not just when it's delivered here, but no matter where it exists, it's constantly tracked throughout its life. Food management, you hear the farm to fork kind of things. I used to be in that industry, and to be able to digitally track the movement of food to make sure that the food you're eating tonight at the restaurant, it wasn't sitting out on a dock in Uruguay for 3 weeks and in a hot bin and just spoiling. So you could, again, because you could have this trusted ledger across a world, then lots of people writing to it, you could manage that chain of custody. And then selling and leasing of equipment, as I mentioned. Other ways, the government, lots of governments are dabbling in this right now. Obviously, IRS is very interested in this. You could keep your entire tax history on the blockchain. Healthcare, we mentioned before. All the records are stored in one place, and you can provide access to it. Banking and finance, this is, I think, these guys are spending the most money right now on this because, I'll show you in a second, there's a fortune to be saved in operational costs if they use this properly. An automobile is, service records, history, maintenance, and so on. Who's active in blockchain? Actually, China, as of a few months ago, it's changing every month, but as of a few months ago, 95% of all the deployed blockchains in the world are in China. They are definitely ahead. And they've moved beyond just a digital currency and starting to use it as digital assets and smart contracts. But the world is catching up. You will see a lot of deployments of the first blockchains in the United States this year. Who's active? I mentioned the Wall Street world. So here's what I mentioned, you want to sell a stock, and Nicole and I want to share, I'm going to sell 100 shares of IBM. That's how many parties are involved, besides she and I, in the transaction. So that's like 9 different systems that all have to reconcile. It takes 3 days. Here's Wall Street, the highest technology organization in the world, you would think. It takes them 3 days to reconcile between all those 9 parties, because they each have their own version of Was it 100 shares? Was it 99 shares? Was it IBM? Was it IBM preferred stock? Was it on this day? Was it on this day? Was it for $100? For every variable can be done improperly, so they all have to be reconciled. With blockchain, there's only one of those databases that everybody's writing to and referring to. Healthcare, as I said, you imagine everything: patients, equipment, doctors, diseases, maybe babies, in utero information, payers, sensors, suppliers, all that potentially can be in blockchain. All right, so what do you do about blockchain right now? Well, I've been around a long time. I remember when the internet was starting to really, before it was even starting to, I started playing with it probably in 1985 or so. And it was almost like the dark web. I mean, nobody knew about it except techies. And then it's, sort of the hype started to build in 1990 or so and started to materialize in 95. I think we are about in that point right now with the blockchain. It'll turn a lot faster. It's not going to take as long because we're now standing on 20 years more of technology. But this is like the internet of the late 80s in terms of the degree of sophistication, the degree of hype, the lack of experience, the lack of protocol, the lack of government regulation. It is the wild, wild west right now in blockchain. So there's a lot of money to be made. There's also a lot of money to be lost in blockchain. So I would say, read, analyze, look for impacts. For those of you in business already, see how it will impact your industry. Look at your industry and say, if they had blockchain, how would my business change? And can I be on the leading edge of that rather than being overrun by it? What opportunities exist between that? Can I connect to other organizations that I couldn't have done before? And then start small, is what I say. We're doing a lot of work. My company, we're a software engineering company. We build large digital products for Amazon, Cisco, CNN, Overstock. And most everybody is doing prototypes right now. Very few are actually ready to deploy. Maybe some of the Wall Street companies, but it's got a lot of potential, but it's very early days. So start small, build some prototypes, focus on your pain points. There are a lot of great problems that don't require blockchain to be used to solve. So don't make every problem a nail just because you have a hammer. It's a great technology, but it's not for every problem in the world. Stay involved and watch the system grow. You're gonna hear from some great people. This is my commercial. So we do this a lot. We have 600 engineers, and we're doing a lot of blockchain prototype work right now. All right, with that, I am going to take my seat as a panelist now. Yeah, thank you.